Okay, so today we are going to talk about a project on the Solana ecosystem. It is called Infinity. So today we're going to go through a little journey. This is going to be an evolution of how staking has transformed. This is going to focus on Solana primarily, but it's like this in a different couple ecosystems. But the project I'm going to talk about today is basically the next evolution of liquid staking, or at least they're the pioneers of it. So the topic of today's presentation is From Lockups to Infinite Potential. We're going to talk about how Solana has evolved from simply locking up your tokens when you're staking to becoming a sophisticated, capital efficient strategy. We're going to cover INF and how it transforms passive yield into productive capital that works more efficiently for you. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Okay, because the final product we're going to talk about is a little bit more advanced, or at least the idea behind it is, but it's built off of a basic principle for all blockchains that deal with staking, so proof of stake blockchains. Okay, so whenever you think of staking, people generally think of it as just a yield mechanism. Okay, but that's not entirely the truth. Staking is fundamentally a security mechanism that is designed to keep blockchains honest or to protect blockchains. It's not necessarily a financial product that's optimized for returns. So whenever you stake your crypto, you're not necessarily just depositing capital, you're actually underwriting the network's integrity. Whenever you pick which validator you're going to use and you delegate your tokens to that validator, you are putting your economic weight behind supporting the blockchain. Okay. The yield that you earn is just compensation for providing that security. You know, you're underwriting the behavior of other people that might be operating on the network. So that yield that you get is, your reward for taking on that risk. You can think of it as insurance premiums that are paid to validators who keep the network honest and operational. So here is how staking in a traditional sense works. There are validators, which are the people that run the nodes. They propose new blocks of transactions, and they maintain the digital ledger, the blockchain's integrity. They operate the infrastructure or the nodes, but they do rely on people delegating their tokens to them to gain influence and consensus. Okay, and that's where we come in. We as delegators assign our economic weight, our economic value to whichever validators we choose. And this amplifies how much voting power that they have, how much equity they have on the blockchain to be able to process, you know, post transactions. Whenever we deposit with these people or use them to delegate our assets to, our capital becomes their credibility in the network's decision making. And that brings us to the third point here, which is slashing risk. So everybody that participates in this ecosystem is incentivized to behave uh, ethically, because if not, the tokens that they have up for collateral could be slashed, which means just taken. It's a penalty for acting maliciously. It's a little bit less common on Solana, but it is something that on Ethereum is especially true. So like a node runner, a validator, they have to put up 32 Ethereum just to operate a node. Okay, so that heavy initial investment, and then alongside of other people's delegations with you, is a reason why a lot of the validators will act honestly. It's in everybody's best interest. So that being said, whenever we choose our validators, we can look at certain metrics to see who is the best for the job. And they look at things like runtime. So if the node is taking a lot of downtime, it's usually not a good node or not a good validator. They look at things like how much economic weight, like how much stake you have in the network. So we can look at some of these metrics and determine who are good validators or who we would trust our assets to make sure that they're operating ethically. And this shared risk model ensures accountability across the ecosystem. And so here is the issue or the hidden cost of traditional staking, and that is illiquidity. So whenever you stake, your capital is locked up. It requires this locking capital to enforce that honest behavior. Okay, because just think about it like this. If there was no lockup period a bad actor could uh, do some malicious activity on the blockchain and then remove their stake from the equation before they ever get penalized for it. So that's why with these staking ecosystems and traditional staking, there is usually a lockup period. And there's also like what's an unbonding period is what it's usually referred to. So there'll be a series of time, anywhere from 3 to 7 to 28 days, where you would put a request in to withdraw your assets, but then you have to wait for those tokens to actually become unbonded from the network. So that is one of the downsides to, or the main downside to staking. It's not necessarily the lockup period, but it's the opportunity cost of what you could be doing with that capital that you can't because it's locked into the network. So once staked, your capital becomes productive, but only in one way. Okay, you can't simultaneously secure the network and participate in DeFi, lending, or trading strategies. So traditional staking forces is binary choice. Do we want to participate in security, or do we want to have our liquidity to go do other things with? Okay, so this system and this trade-off is what limited capital efficiency for quite some time. So where the problem is, that illiquidity, eventually this problem was solved, and it was solved in the sense of liquid staking. And this helps separate the exposure that you have to the network from the mobility that you lose by traditional staking. Okay, so uh, it still operates on a similar situation, like a similar setup, where there's, whenever you stake your Solana, uh, you get back a token that represents your stake. Whatever provider you use, they still stake your tokens. They become the validator that you choose, but they just issue you a token that you can use that is widely recognized by other platforms. Okay, so let's say you have 10 Solana and you stake those 10 Sol, you might get back. It's not usually one to one, but you'll get back liquid stake tokens that represent your stake with that validator, with that provider. Okay. So these liquid stake tokens in this ecosystem represents a fundamental shift in how staking works. Okay, this allows you to maintain your staking rewards while having access to that extra liquidity as well. Okay, so you can think of liquid stake tokens as a tradable receipt or a claim on your stake Solana, like I just described. The underlying network still sees locked committed capital, but the DeFi protocols that we interact with see a liquid movable asset that can flow through the ecosystem that also represents that real capital. And it's not necessarily a derivative. It is just uh, a receipt token or claim token. So how this works is you stake your Solana, you pick whichever validator you want. I'm sure you guys might recognize like Jito Sol or M Sol out of this list of tokens here. But then that becomes your validator. Okay, you receive back a liquid stake token that is your receipt. If you ever want to go back and get your Solana, you just go back and you can give them back your liquid stake token, or more modern, you can just swap them on some exchanges. But then you can also use those liquid stake tokens to participate in DeFi across different protocols. And if we have enough time here at the end, I'll show you some a pretty cool, I guess, couple strategies. We'll talk about some things that you can do with liquid stake tokens and specifically INF. But this whole evolution into liquid staking um, really changes the game in the sense that the capital that you want to use to secure the network does not just have to get locked up. You can actually uh, transfer that value around still. So the superpower behind this whole ecosystem is the composability, which is the ability to work with different products or work with different the compatibility, I guess you could say, between different ecosystems, and yield stacking. Okay, so on a base layer, your liquid stake tokens still continue to earn staking rewards as the validators secure the network and generate yield. You can then turn around and use that liquid stake token as collateral for borrowing to provide liquidity and more, all while maintaining that staking exposure. And this means that you can stack returns from multiple different sources. You have your staking APY, your lending rates, your trading fees, all these different things that you can yield using the same crypto or using the same value. Okay. And while it might seem like it's all awesome, there's one thing we have to point out too, is that doing these stacking strategies, this is no different than using leverage. Okay. Whenever you're rehypothecating money like this, you're staking somewhere, borrowing against it, using that capital somewhere else, you really need to be careful because it also, along with the increase in the capital efficiency, it also compounds your risk. Okay. If you have all your stuff hypothecated throughout things and there's a smart contract failure or one of your positions gets liquidated, you can be in a lot of trouble, because let's say you take a loan out against a crypto to do something else, and the crypto that you loaned out tanks, and then you get liquidated. You lose the initial claim to those staked assets. You're stuck with whatever you had done with the borrowing and lending position. Okay, so there's certain considerations you need to take with this as well, because the more you rehypothecate, the more you essentially leverage yourself, the more risk you're taking on. And so here, let's take a look at an example of the difference between these two systems. Okay, so here we on the traditional side of things, us as the user, we would pick whichever validator we'd like, lock our Solana up, and get rewards. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to follow. Those rewards just usually get added to your position. It depends on the provider usually, but most of the time those rewards just get added to your position. Okay. And it's pretty singular. There's nothing else you can really do with those that Solana. It's just locked in the protocol. With liquid staking, we would select our liquid stake protocol. They stake the Solana still for us, and they give us back a liquid token that represents that Solana that we have staked with them. Okay, so we can then turn around and use that liquid token for lending, trading, any other DeFi applications, setting up liquidity pools. And actually, it's a little side tangent. Setting up liquidity pools as an example, it used to be even with liquid staking that you'd get your liquid stake token, and if you wanted to swap it back or get your other tokens back, you'd have to go back to your provider. You'd have to request the tokens back and exchange them just like you did whenever you staked. But because people have done enough of this liquid staking, they've paired the liquid stake tokens up with Solana in liquidity pools. Now it kind of bypasses that need to go back to the provider. But yeah, so you can use these tokens to do certain things like that to help even further bolster the economy, bolster the ecosystem. Okay, awesome. So one unintended consequence of this liquid staking and the ecosystem that was built around it is that now there's what is called fragmentation. Okay, so uh, liquid staking eliminated that illiquidity, that locking up of your tokens, but it introduced a new problem, and that is this fragmentation. So the Solana ecosystem now has hundreds, if not thousands, of different liquid stake token providers. They all each have their own unique validators, risk profiles, and liquidity depths. And this ended up creating silos of capital where users must choose between certain liquid stake token providers, essentially forcing you to pick a team. Each choice, of course, carries different risks, different yields, and different DeFi integration supports. Okay, so you might want to go provide liquidity or borrow and lend against certain tokens, but those certain liquid stake tokens might not be available on certain platforms. Okay, so that's where having these siloed ecosystems of different liquid stake tokens can be a problem because you might want to use a certain provider or use a certain token, but let's say wherever you want to rehypothecate, they don't accept that token. Okay, so that's where you run into a little bit of an issue when it comes to integrating these different liquid stake tokens into different dApps. Okay, so this while we did solve for a certain problem, having that illiquidity, uh, it does kind of create this overall reduction in capital efficiency. We solved the lockups, but we fractured the ecosystem's liquidity in the process. And so you can see like these, this is just an example of a couple of different um, liquid stake tokens, but Jito Sol, Marinade Sol, Jupiter Sol, these there's hundreds of them, if not thousands of them. I would say hundreds of legit ones. But there's no shortage of options, and that begins to bring out problems whenever it comes to using these things elsewhere. Because then each application you now deal with, they would be responsible for integrating whatever token that you're wanting to use or whatever into their ecosystem as well. So here is the solution. This is where we get into bringing it all back together. Okay, so this is INF. what I'll call for this presentation the aggregation layer. Okay, so INF is a single token that represents staked Solana exposure across multiple different liquid stake token providers. Okay, so instead of just holding one liquid stake token like your Marinade Sol or your Jupiter Sol, INF holds a diversified basket of Solana's top liquid stake token providers. Okay, you can kind of think of this as an on-chain non-custodial index fund for Solana staking. So whenever you are in INF or you're holding INF, you're not just exposed to one liquid stake token. You're exposed to all the liquid stake tokens that they hold underneath their umbrella. Okay, so INF operates one layer above standard liquid staking, where they aggregate that fragmented liquidity into a unified surface that DeFi protocols can integrate once and access everywhere. Okay, so instead of a borrowing and lending protocol, instead of them having to integrate 100 different liquid stake tokens into their ecosystem, they can integrate one that would have exposure to all that stuff. Okay, and that's where INF comes in. And so here is the three layers of their architecture. Okay, so the first layer is governance. The DAO evaluates and votes on which liquid stake token providers meet their standards. Okay, only whitelisted protocols can be included in the INF basket, which ensures quality control, and that's voted on by the holders. The protocol itself also sets specific targets for each approved LST based on risk assessment, liquidity depth, and validator distribution. Okay, and these targets guide rebalancing. A lot of it depends on how popular these different LSTs are, how much trading volume, how much demand there are for certain LSTs, and they'll weight their basket according to those targets. Then the third layer there is dynamic incentives. So INF adjusts swap fees dynamically, lowering the cost for deposits of underweight assets and raising them for overweight ones. The market automatically rebalances the pool towards targets. So what that means there is that sets up almost like an arbitrage opportunity. Okay, so each of these liquid stake tokens, again, they have their own type of incentive structure. They have their own ways in which they work. So let's say that Jupiter Sol is earning like 6%, and Jito Sol is earning 6.5%. The price or the value of INF would be an aggregation of all of those. Okay, so it would be whatever the average is of all the different tokens underneath its ecosystem. Okay, so here's where INF or why INF matters. And one large part of it is risk distribution. Okay, so with your traditional liquid stake tokens, you're picking a single token, a single provider. So that means there's a single point of failure. Your entire liquid stake position depends on one provider and their smart contracts functioning correctly. Same thing with the validator. You're concentrated to one specific set of validators that are selected by a single team. And it says a specific set there because somewhere like Blaze, they do something similar where they take your Solana that you stake and they spread it out amongst, I want to say, maybe 100 different validators. Okay, so some of these tokens, like I just said, they have their own different metrics and how they work, or like their own mechanisms for how they work. But regardless, you're still stuck to that one token's governance or like however they operate. And then there's also protocol risk as well. If the liquid stake token protocol is exploited or fails, everything you have with them would be at risk. So with INF, you have a little bit more of a diversified approach. Okay, your risk is distributed across multiple LST providers, reducing that single point of failure. If you have a basket of 500 different tokens that you're in and one goes down, that's not nearly as detrimental as having all your eggs in that one basket that goes down. Okay. We have validator diversity. The exposure is spread across dozens or hundreds of different validators through these different liquid stake token protocols. And of course, with your resilience to your system, the individual protocol failures are contained. Again, if you have all your eggs in one basket and it burns up, then we got a problem. So INF doesn't necessarily eliminate the risk, but it does redistribute it across the ecosystem, which creates more resilience within your staking position. So, whenever it comes to this capital and our staking positions, this is the end game, and this is what INF has helped to create. And as far as I know, I've done a little bit of looking. They are top of the class when it comes to this stuff. I don't know if there's anyone really competing with them to, especially in the numbers, the numbers and the partnerships that they have. But first things first, it creates a unified surface. So INF Infinity creates a massive unified liquidity surface that DeFi applications can integrate more efficiently. I just touched on this a little bit ago. Whenever you're a borrowing and lending protocol or you're looking to list a token on your platform, would you rather set up what might be unique entries or unique positions or infrastructure for each of these different tokens? Or would you rather support one token that gets exposure to all that stuff? Okay, so from a DeFi application standpoint, it's better as well. And also you have capital efficiency. So you're still using that staked SOL as collateral more efficiently than using these fragmented LSTs, which can allow you to unlock higher borrowing capacity. So the whole paradigm shift here is, we to graduate from this idea of treating staking as just a passive savings account and treating it more as productive collateral that can be simultaneously secure the network, earn yield, and unlock leverage for additional strategies. Okay, so INF transforms stake SOL from a dormant asset into the foundation of sophisticated capital allocation. This enables you to maintain security contributions while maximizing productive deployment. You're able to support the network and still go out there and eat too. We're gonna go through a little bit of workshop. Actually, a little bit more time than I was planning on. So we're gonna go ahead and go through a little bit of a workshop. I'll show you around the like what I'm really looking at with this. I'll show you a little bit of my position that I have on Camino, which is a borrowing and lending protocol. But I want to go through a couple like examples of what I'm really looking at with this comparison, especially between Solana. I'll show you why I'm looking at that stuff too. But let's get into it. So if I come over and look at the Solana chart, and I just don't focus on price so much right now, but just look at the chart itself. And then I'm going to pull up Infinity. Okay. And then Solana here. And I guess a better way to show this would be if I go to DeFi Llama. What I'm looking at is how closely these things move together. Okay, so if I go to, oh, I'm already in DeFi Llama. So I go to Tools, and I'm going to go to, where is it? Correlations. So this correlations matrix. Okay, so you can see how closely, and this is something that's useful too for people that get into liquidity pools, and if you're if you do concentrated liquidity, again it can be very risky. There's a lot of issues with it, but whenever you're looking at how correlated or how closely these two tokens are moved together, let's go ahead and I'll remove these two for now. We'll put in Solana and we'll put in INF. Okay, so let's take a look. It's pretty crazy. So over the past 7 days, they move it a 1-to-1. Past month, they move it a 1-to-1. For the past year, 0.999. Okay, so the reason I like to bring this up is because, part of what I've been doing lately is I'll go to my Camino dashboard here. So this is a borrowing and lending protocol on Solana. This is called Camino. And so you can see through, I'm not going to get too deep into like Camino itself, but you can see all these different markets that there are. Okay, so main market is where I do a lot of my borrowing and lending just because there's the most options. But each of these different providers, they all have their own markets where you can come in here and provide their tokens and borrow against them and whatever else. And as you can see here, there's Sanctum. Okay, so right now, currently, INF is making about 6.21%. Okay, and so I'm going to go actually, we're going to pause here for a second. I'm going to go to Sanctum's website because, okay, 6.04%. That's pretty close to what they're saying. So if I go, I want to take a look at something real quick. There was a nice diagram I saw here the other day that I really wanted to share. So if I go maybe, no, we'll go in, I think it might be in Infinity. Okay, this is it actually. So you can come here and compare like Over the past year, for example, or 11 months, staking your Solana with INF versus other liquid stake tokens. Okay, so you have this whole list of different tokens or different just providers themselves. Okay, so this is cool, but this is what I was really looking for. This where INF's yield comes from. Okay, so first things first, you have the regular inflation that comes from, and these numbers are a little bit off, but this is for illustration purposes only. But so you have the regular inflation that comes with the delegation and the supporting of the network. Okay, so how the proof of stake networks reward their people is that whenever the epic or the certain time period has ended, for most places, I think for Solana it's like 2 days or 3 days, something like that, each epic. But each protocol has their own, set times for these epics. So throughout that time, these validators are processing transactions, and then the reward for that is usually paid out in inflation. It's like created tokens that go back to the validators that help support the network. Okay, so in most cases it's an inflationary thing, but a lot of these blockchains have deflationary aspects too. For example, with Solana and Ethereum both, you burn the gas tokens in order to do the transaction. So that's a large part of where that deflationary aspect comes in to fight the inflation. Okay, so the first level is the inflation, the natural rewards for doing your staking. Then also with Solana, they introduced what is called this MEV. It's maximum extractable value. So the validators that operate on Solana, so I guess more broadly, whenever there's for any consensus mechanism, no matter how the transactions are confirmed and processed, ultimately they end up being processed in blocks and added to the chain of blocks, the digital ledger that's called the blockchain. So with Solana, the validators are able to recategorize or reposition the transactions. So instead of them just being posted like a right on the spot, they can reposition how they're processed on the blockchain. And so whenever they do this, generally there's a little bit of Solana left over because they package the transactions to be a little bit more efficient. Okay, so that's where this MEV comes in. So a lot of these different liquid stake tokens that you would use also have some type of MEV infrastructure built into them too, where they can, earn additional rewards based on being more efficient with the network. Okay, then we have your block rewards. So this is like from the liquid staking itself. And then you have the trading fees. Okay, so this is where INF is a little bit more unique in the sense that they actually have yield on top of the staking yield that they get because it's a basket of tokens, because they operate a liquidity pool of this basket of tokens. Whenever people go there and trade these LSTs for each other, INF also accepts a trading fee for doing that. Okay, so this is an additional stack on top of that yield that you would get just from the liquid staking itself too. Excuse me. So what I'm looking at here is this. These things move, INF and Solana move so closely together. Let's go back over here. So right now, INF, they say 6.21% here. We just looked it up here, 6.04%, pretty close. So 6%, let's just say. You get supply here, and it's natively earning that 6%. You don't really get any additional supply APY for it, but you can borrow Solana against that, this 5.44%. And what's really interesting about this is this liquidation loan to value. So generally speaking, you get these high of LTVs or liquidation loan to values if you're using stable coins. They'll let you borrow more against stable coins because it's generally safer. Okay. So whenever you look at something like, let's see, maybe Bitcoin market. I guess Bitcoin, they let you go up to 80%, but some of these, like, let's go to Jito market here. Jito Sol, yeah, 55%. So if you want to supply your Jito Sol and borrow against it, you would get liquidated at a 55% loan to value. Okay. So if we come back down here to Sanctum, that's 95%. So you can borrow a little bit more against it, which, you still would want to maintain conservative ratios. So the 2-to-1 or the 2.0 rule is something we reference here. So let's say that, our liquidation loan to value is 95%. I wouldn't want to borrow more than half of that against it. Okay. But I do currently do that. So if I go to my portfolio, and I'll run through a couple scenarios in which this can actually be really beneficial. So if you're in a bull market, and you just want to get more exposure to the underlying asset, you want to get more exposure to Solana, you can come here and you can lend out your INF tokens and borrow against them. Okay, so you can see here I've supplied about 1,700 bucks in INF, and I'm borrowing about 700 against it. And then I've turned around and I've used this SOL elsewhere, so I'm loaning this Solana back out in the main market as well. Okay, so you can you can basically leverage or loop your position, but you're using an asset that, if the market goes up, both of these are going to go up together. If the market's going down, they're both going to go down together. Okay, so it's a little bit different than, let's say, supplying a volatile asset like Bitcoin or Solana and borrowing USDC against it. Because if the market goes down, your collateral goes down, but your loan stays the same, and then your loan to value increases. Okay, but with this, they move so closely together that you have very little fluctuation in your loan to value. So in a bear market, it's cool. You can gain more exposure to the underlying asset. Like I said, I took the Solana that I borrowed against this. I might have used some of it elsewhere, but for the most part, I put it back into loan out. Maybe even if it's only at 4.5% or whatever it is, 5%, might be a little bit net negative on that, but it's still getting that underlying exposure, getting exposed to more Solana. So one thing that I'm introducing to is borrowing in a bear market. It's a little bit more risky, of course. But these different strategies you can use throughout these different markets. So like let's say we're about to go into a bear market. You want to get out of some of your position and plan for the ride down. What you can do is you can borrow Solana against your INF and then turn around and sell it immediately. Okay, so let's say you have your 10 Solana that you borrow, then you convert it to USDC or something immediately, and then the market goes down. You can buy back the 10 Solana that you owe cheaper whenever the market goes down. Okay. So then, once market bottoms or close to, you want to reposition back in. You can rebuy your Solana back in cheaper, repay your debt, and then you keep the difference. Okay. So it's two different, using the same assets, but two different ways you can approach it and play either side of the market. This is like doing a manual short. Whenever you use like leverage trading positions or like these other positions where you can open up shorts, but you're doing it with USD. That's like, they're essentially doing that same thing on the back end, but you're just paying for a contract with USDC. So this would be like the manual way to short. You're borrowing an asset, selling it, buying it back cheaper, ideally. But yeah, and that is another thing to bring up too, is that if the asset continues to rise, then your debt's going to go up, especially if you swapped it for a stable coin. The one good thing about it is, or at least the saving grace in the sense that, um, you know, for a liquidation standpoint, is that because these things move so well together, it's not so much that you're at very much risk of your collateral getting taken for your loan becoming unhealthy. But it would be a problem if, like, let's say Solana doubles, triples, quadruples, and then you eventually want to pay back your loan, and you have to buy back much higher at that point. If you want to find any information about INF, you can go to CoinMarketCap is one of my favorite places to go. The website, they do have a lot of good information here. So if you just go down here through, yeah, these FAQs, you can find a lot of good information about the project all through here. A lot of the same stuff that they talk about in this about page here. So for those of you that might be brand new and not even have an idea where to go to look for stuff or whatever else, but this CoinMarketCap is a great place to start. Oftentimes, no matter what token you're looking at, you go to the about section, you'll be able to get a very good beat on the project just from reading the about section. And now they have this AI here too, which is pretty cool. You can ask it questions. But yeah, honestly, that's about it for me. So thank you for going on that little journey with me, talking about some staking, some liquid staking, and finally INF, which is a revolutionary new evolution even further of staking on Solana. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below. And if you have any suggestions for any other content you'd like to see, let me know below as well. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.